Um, so, as the title here says, a tour of Greek Americans in New York and beyond through ephemera. I just want to define ephemera in case anyone might have any doubts as to what it is. Ephemera is something, paper items that were originally meant to be discarded after use, but have since become collectibles. Besides being enjoyable to find and collect, vintage ephemera is valuable primary source information, which offers unique windows into cultures past. And that's exactly what I've been doing, is trying to find things that have something to do with Greek people in this country. So with that, I'm going to take you to my first item, which is an old envelope from probably the early 1900s, and it's for a Greek hotel located on Greenwich Street. So when the immigrant got finished processing themselves through Ellis Island, took the ferry over to Battery Park, what's next? Well, they needed a place to stay. Perhaps they could stay at the Greek Hotel. And at that time, a lot of envelopes put a lot of advertising on them. So this is the front, which shows you a picture of a drawing of the hotel. And there's some Greek lettering at the bottom. But the back is full of information. This is the back of the envelope. And it's telling you everything that's available there. And among other things, if I remember reading this correctly, they offer things like, in addition to rooms, tickets for railroads and for all kinds of other transportation, even possibly to go back to the homeland. But this is pretty old. This is from the early 1900s. And again, a lot of the advertising then had a lot of writing on it, because they didn't have radio, they didn't have TV, so this was a way to advertise.
Who's the proprietor, that name on the vinyl? Your relative.
Yorgos Rasoyanis, the Efendis, he's the director. Who knows? Okay. So here's a postcard, and postcards are also ephemera, as Tony did his presentation a couple of weeks ago. But this is a couple of years later. Why isn't this appearing? Okay.
Have you ever been to 4 Greenwich Street to see what's there now?
No.
You went forward before, Greenwich Street.
Okay, we're not moving forward. Sorry about that. The wonders of modern technology here.
Somebody arrived? No. Try again. Want to start at the story again?
Great. All right, maybe we lost the connection. Yeah, we lost the connection.
Oh, the electric, who's playing the electricity?
I think so.
Luke was.
All right. Okay.
Got it back?
Yeah, I got it back.
Okay.
So this is a postcard of another hotel downtown, but this one seems to have more, they're emphasizing more the fact that they're a travel agency on the ground floor. But you can definitely tell this is New York by the lamppost and the street sign. And it's called the Hotel Patras. And of course you have a Greek and American flag. And this is the back of the card. So it was a steamship agency called Kalamaridis on Washington Street, corner of Cedar. And this is a postcard that someone had sent to someone in Carthage, Missouri, in 1921, exactly. So, penny postcards, remember them? So the main emphasis of my collection is baggage labels. And this was a baggage label I had found for a hotel on West 58th Street called the Acropolis. Was it owned by Greeks? Yeah. Okay. Because Stacy had sent me some information on it a while ago, that it had several different names. Is it still there, the building, or they tore it down?
It's down.
Yeah. It used to be known as the Trimore, then the West Park, and then at some point even the Wilson Hotel. Anyway, so this was a label that people could put on their luggage or trunks, and it's, Hotel Acropolis, very Greek, of course.
It was owned by Greeks, and it was also had Atlas as one of the names, Papadeas. That's the family owned it.
Wow.
So this is the St. Moritz Hotel, which was another hotel. This is going many years later, owned by Gregory Taylor and the Taylor family. They established a scholarship for attending Cornell's School of Hotel Management, and also
George Nicholas was the one.
and also a scholarship at the Archdiocese for divinity students. So at the bottom is a postcard also from the St. Moritz, but it shows, and I don't know if you could read what it says at the very bottom, but it's 48 Greek flags being displayed at the St. Moritz Hotel. And without any further information, I am assuming this is probably during World War II. Probably 48 flags that were going to be distributed to each of the states, probably in thanking people for, and we'll see later, contributing to the Greek Relief Fund during World War II. But that's my assumption, but that's what the...
And the St. Moritz is where Stacy and George Nicholas got married.
Okay.
The reception was
But
there.
now it's called the Ritz-Carlton. Yeah, Ritz-Carlton.
So now we're moving further into the, and this is the Hotel Rex, which is owned by, was run by, as it says on the back, John Nicholas. Okay, so this was another Greek-owned hotel.
They lived there.
They lived there.
That was George's grandfather.
So as the community became more established, they started going on vacations. So one of the places, like everyone else, this was before much air travel, they used to go to Florida, and the Floridian Hotel in Miami Beach was the winter headquarters for Greek Americans. And John Nicholas was the managing director.
He loved to put his name on everything.
So that's the Floridian. Now, if they didn't want to go to Florida, they could go to the Catskills, the Borscht Belt, or what would we call it, the Bouzouki Belt? And this is the Califea, and this is thanks to Tony. This is Tony from Tony's collection, because I have not been able to find any cards about of any of the Greek resorts in the Catskills.
I stayed there once, for a week.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a week vacation there.
Yeah.
With kids.
So it's something I'm still looking for, but I'm glad Tony had a copy so we could put it into this presentation. And this was another place, Sunset Springs Hotel, and this was also,
Sunset Springs. Was that in Monroe?
yeah, no,
No, this is
Plains Falls,
Haynes Falls.
Catskills.
And then the dance stairs was the nightclub. See where that green is? And the big veranda was like the meeting place at night. And you can't see, but where those little flowers are, the roses, there was a tiny swimming pool. Tiny.
Tiny. Tiny being the operative word.
Was it blowing?
And that's where I met George.
There's a very lively social
Really?
season there in the summer.
I never went to any of these places, I don't know.
The city would go up. How far was it from the city?
to play poker.
Oh.
This was
Heavy
the
duty
game.
gambling.
And we couldn't wait until Monday because we find decks of cards that we that was our brightest spot. Oh, good, we have to look at all these decks of cards.
Nice memories.
And they had the nightclub.
So there were also Greek banks. This is a postcard of the Bank of Athens, probably from the 20s or 30s. And eventually they were all incorporated under the Atlantic Bank, which took over most of these smaller banks. So my mother and her circle of friends from the cathedral, they all at one point worked at one of these Greek banks. They went from bank to bank, you know, after having 1 year maybe of enough of this Greek, working for Greeks, you know. They moved to another bank. But a lot of them did work for these many banks. There were a couple of them.
And that's a postcard? That's a postcard?
Yeah, that's a postcard.
Wow.
So I'm including this because I love the writing on it, but Kalimanopoulos is a well-known ship-owning family in Greece. And this is someone from their office in Patra writing to someone here in the U.S. at 1028 6th Avenue, corner of 58th Street. And New York is not quite spelled New York. I'm not sure what that, New York? I'm not sure. But it's a pretty fancy, this is an envelope.
It's a fancy time.
So, so when I was younger, my mother used to say when she was young, the center of Greek life in New York was Madison Street. I never put two and two together. I always thought it was Madison Avenue. I said, Madison Avenue? She said, no, Madison Street. So when I got older, Madison Street is a street. I went to visit it. It's in like Chinatown now, but it's Lower East Side, sort of bordering Chinatown and, Lower East Side. But that's where a lot of the Greek shops were in the 20s and 30s. So this was a barber shop. And apparently, and I've seen this with in other cities as well, envelopes from other cities. Very often the barber shop was where mail was directed to. So this is for Mr. Stelios Karas, the barber shop on 57 Madison Street. It was like the center of life there.
Like you got your mail there?
Yeah, you probably got your mail there, exactly. So another business on Madison Street was Atlas Printing Company. And this shows you, it says Mega Vivipolio, big bookstore. Atlas, 25 Madison Street, New York. And it's from Christodoulos in Nebraska. So just like the hotel, which had a lot of advertising on the back, they also had a lot of advertising on the back. So their telephone was 43480 Orchard, which is sort of weird because usually the name is before the number, you know, like Plaza 3, 4000 or something. On the left, you can see Express Gata Baulasas. They would send you your trunks for you. So it was like a travel agent and an information. It says free information, plηροφορία δωρεάν, free information. So it's like a combination travel agency. And they also had, is that say, on the right, I think it says, yeah, it was also rooms. They had a hotel. So it was almost anything you could imagine. So anyway, Madison Street was the center of Greek life in the 20s and 30s. Then they started moving uptown. And Atlas Company moved to 8th Avenue, and this is one of their catalogs from 1936. By this point, they had become a real established business, in addition to doing printing and things like that. This catalog has everything under the sun, from wedding stuff and baptismal stuff to vestments, church furnishings, Greek gifts, books, calendars, stationery, postcards, anything. I mean, it's like 30, 40 pages of all this stuff. So they had moved to 8th Avenue, which became the new center of Greek life in New York in probably the late 30s, 40s, and on. Whoops. So one of the things that they used to print were these cards, and these were cards that, were greeting cards essentially. These are all postcards. So from left to right, this is for the New Year's, for a name day, and for a wedding. And there's tons of examples of these, but they're all from the Atlas Printing Company at 25 Madison Street.
And that card, was it shiny? The one on the right?
They're all not shiny, a little bit. I mean, they faded over the years. Most of these are about 100 years old. These are probably from the 20s, so they're a little faded. The colors are a little faded, but they always had like these romantic scenes with flowers and stuff, and it was yeah. In addition to that, if you wanted to, and the colors here are a little off, but if you wanted to communicate with friends back in Greece, you could get one of these postcards, and all of these are depicting various scenes in New York, and at the bottom it says in Greek, like χαιρετισμούς από τη Νέα Υόρκη, greetings from New York, or I'm not sure what. Is that a heart on the bottom? Yeah. So there was usually, on the left is the Singer Building, which was one of the tallest buildings at that time. It's probably the teens. And just a little factoid, it was the tallest building ever to be torn down. I think in the 50s it was torn down. But at that time it was the tallest building, and it says at the bottom, χαιρετισμούς ευκαιρίδος. I'm not sure what that means, but anyway. Wishes. So the top one is χαιρετισμούς από τη ξενιχτιά, from abroad. So again, these were intended to be sent back to the homeland with scenes of New York. But they were all printed, as you see here, by the Atlas Company. All of these have this on the back, 25 Madison Street in New York. So to me, this proves that Madison Street was, in fact, the center of Greek life at one point. No one seems to know that, so I'm just telling you. Now we all know, right? All right, so now we're moving on to something completely different. Legas and Drivas. This is an old oregano tin, and Legas and Drivas was a company that's been around almost more than 100 years now. And one of the things one of their brands was called Aristocratic. And I remember when I was young, my mother used to use Aristocratic macaronia to make the pasticcio with, and the recipe was on the side of the package. But on the left is a thimble made out of celluloid, but it had their Aristocratic Legas and Drivas brand, just as an advertising item and something just to promote their brand. So, no need, this is Venizelos Coffee, just another company that eventually, thrived, probably began in the 20s or 30s, and this is a... Pardon? There's another one, Vasilios, but I can't put everything in this show, so I have to make choices.
They wrote my father up because he's...
Oh, really? We'll talk. All right. So, during the 20s and 30s, there was this movement to establish relationships between the U.S. and, Greece, and people living in the Greek Americans in the U.S. and the Greek, Americans back in the homeland. And this is a piece of needlework. And I've tried to find out I've seen items like this in Greece, and even they don't really know what it is or why it was made. But you can tell there's a Greek flag and an American flag represented, and there's always a cross on these. So those are the three elements you'll find on a lot of these things.
What's hanging from the middle of the floor?
What?
What's hanging from the heart?
It's a heart. So they were embellished with like a heart, and then it looks like an anchor, so that this... and there's a crown on the top. But this were probably tokens of love or appreciation to be sent either from Greece to here or here to there. I'm not even sure where they were made. Some people say it was made here, some they say were made in Greece. They were maybe made in both places. But anyway, these are probably from the 20s and 30s, mostly 20s.
Cross and an anchor and
Right.
Heart.
Heart.
the other thing is a sword.
Oh, it's.
And a sword, you're right, absolutely. So there's a lot of symbolism in these, so,
And the crown.
and the crown for the royal family, but more studies to be done on this. So very similar, this is made out of celluloid. It's about 6 inches by 5 inches. So it's the same material that they used to make political buttons, but this is like a huge political button. But again, the Greek and American flag, the Acropolis and the Capitol building, and a picture of someone. Could be your loved one, maybe, and you sent this to your loved one.
Maybe she was running for office.
I doubt it, but could be. Anyway,
On Madison Street.
on Madison Street. So, again, it's the Greek and American flags, bringing them together in friendship, and that's more or less what this is all about. So this is one of my favorite pieces, and Vicki will attest to this story. We had gone to the American School of Classical Studies gala a couple of years ago, and they're showing slides from the Gennadian Library, which they're affiliated with. And all of a sudden this pops up, and I look at it and I say, I don't know if you remember, I have that, I said. Anyway, to make a long story short, I went up to the librarian and the archivist afterwards and told them I have a copy of that poster that you showed in the slideshow. Except theirs has no calendar. See the calendar at the bottom? And theirs had no printing on the top, which says the Victory Market and has names of the proprietors in Springfield, Massachusetts. Wow. And I happened to have a picture of it, so I showed it to them. And they were ecstatic. And I wanted to know why. Well, theirs has no date on it, has no calendar. They had estimated that it was circa 1920. And my version proves the calendar is 1920, and it proved their, assumption that this was 1920, circa 1920. So they asked if they could have a copy of this. I sent it to them in the dimensions, and I guess they put it in as part of their archives now. And it's actually on display in the library because I had taken a tour of the library, and it's on permanent display there.
Which library?
The Gennadion. The Gennadion Library is a library in Athens started by a man named Gennadion in the 19-teens or something. I think he was a diplomat or something, and he had collected a huge library, and he built a building, and eventually they added to the collection, and I don't know when it became affiliated with the American School of Classical Studies, because it's across the street. So, yeah, in Kolonaki. It's up the street from Evangelismos, the hospital. It's further up. And it's a beautiful neoclassical building. And it's used a lot by the students at the American School. So now they're affiliated with each other. So. So, now this is a photograph I found, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. It looks like a frontier town, and I'm sure it was a black and white photograph that had been colorized, painted, but it shows the Greek flag on the building on the right and the American flag on the left. And if you look closely, the building on the left is a Greek restaurant, Greek writing. I don't know what's under the awning, but the second building where the Greek flag is has more Greek writing, and so does the building on the right. So this was a Greek town, probably somewhere out west, but I'm not sure where.
By a railroad.
It could be by a railroad. It could be Utah because they had a lot of Greeks. It could be somewhere in California, but who knows? But it's definitely like 1920s if you look at the car and everything. But what's interesting again is the fact that it's the Greek and American flag and you have all the Greek writing. So who knows what this is? Unfortunately, no one identified anything, but anyway. So this is a business card from the Niarchos and Company. They were candy makers in Buffalo, New York. And I had read somewhere that Niarchos, Stavros Niarchos, the ship owner, actually spent some time there with his family. This is one branch of his family. And I just like this business card because it's really interesting printing. And it's just, something from the early, based on the writing and everything, it's, again, the early part of the century. So there were businesses like this beyond New York. This is Buffalo, of course. So one of the major businesses of a lot of Greeks who came were sweet shops or confectionaries confectionery stores. This one shows a shop in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The luncheonette is on the right where they serve, ice cream and things like that. On the left, where there's the candy shop. And my grandfather had a store like this also in Altoona, Pennsylvania. So we don't have any postcards of it, but I'm sure it looked almost exactly like this. This is another example of a shop in Oneonta, New York. Again, Lascaris, the soda shop on the right, and on the left, the candy shop. And here's another one from the Greek Candy Kitchen in Terre Haute, Indiana. James Georgopoulos, proprietor. The most handsome candy store in the Midwest. So, again,
He was from Peloponnesus.
I'm sure. So this is a souvenir mirror on the other side, and it was given out by the Greek Candy Kitchen, which is, we just saw their postcard, compliments of the Greek Candy Kitchen, and it shows you the various stones for, I think that's the birthdays, and on the other side there's a mirror. It's in pretty bad shape. It's about 2 inches. 2.5, maybe 2.5 inches.
Yeah, it's the kind you like. That's it.
So I'm really fascinated by this because it's showing the Greek and American flags, but it's from 1905. Think about that. That's only a few years after the major, Greeks started coming here. And they had a wholesale company, the Greek American Fruit Company up in Glen Falls. And it shows how many bananas they were selling and different kinds of Glen Falls. Did I say? What did I say?
Glen Street.
No,
It says
sorry.
Glen Street.
Glen Falls, yeah. 1905. And I found this at one of the paper shows I go to, and just based on the design, this is late 1800s, early 1900s, very Victorian. But this guy with a Greek name, Nikolaidis, had a shop in Saratoga, New York, where he sold Japanese stuff, and he also had a branch in Washington, D.C. And I believe this was like the wrapping paper. So,
That's interesting. I mean, sell Greek stuff is Japanese.
now, because advertising, we didn't have radio and television like 100 years ago, or more than that, one of the things that a lot of companies used to do is release something called trade cards. And they used to have series of trade cards. So this particular series is from the Clark Thread Company. And these are pretty large. They're like maybe 4 by 6. And they depicted various different countries with a native dress, a particular scene, and some flower from the country. So this particular one is from Greece, and it's from, I think it says Sparta there. And, every country was represented, not all of them, but quite a few of them. So this is one example of a trade card using Greece to sell their products. Singer sewing machines. These were postcards, various different types that were selling the Singer sewing machine. And it always, and all other ethnic groups were represented as well. And it always showed them in their costumes, working away at their sewing machines. And I'm sure that, these women and the F Zone definitely dressed like that when they were sewing clothes. But anyway, Singer sewing machines. This is Turkish Trophies, was a tobacco company. Again, they issued this for many different ethnic groups. This was for the Greek. And again, it was advertising cards, but as I indicated with the ephemera, it became collectible after a while, and it just, it's a pretty scene showing a beautiful woman holding the Greek flag. So I don't want to give any short shrift to the Cypriots among us, but this is one of the few, if any, depictions of Cypriots. And it shows the British Empire coming in to save Britain, introducing civilization into Cyprus. In the basis of soap, German laundry soap. And you see on the left, everyone hipping it up, celebrating because Britain is going to come in and save the country. Like they're not civilized, Typical of the time. This was like 1900, late 1800s.
The best thing that the British did was education.
There you go.
That was
So, anyway, this is Cyprus. So, this is a postcard published by a company in Manchester, New Hampshire, and it depicts a lot of the heroes from the Revolutionary War of 1821. I sort of have to assume this was probably around 1920, celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Greek Revolution. But again, it shows the connection to the old country. They were printing cards like this here in this country, depicting the Greek Revolution, and probably a Greek, I'm not sure what the writing on the side says, but I'm sure it was a Greek company. So as we got into World War II, on the top you see a card, about Greece fighting on. It's a small card, but that image was also used on posters. The bottom is a postcard, giving you the relationship between Franklin Roosevelt and the King of Greece at the time, King George, and V for victory in the middle. And, again, just to propaganda for the war effort. And this is another postcard, extolling the virtues of Greece during World War II. And there's also another version of this where Winston Churchill, there's a picture of Winston Churchill, and there's a quote from him about heroes fight like Greeks, or Greeks fight like heroes. I forget the exact quote, but it's a similar scene with an F Zone in the Acropolis. So these are 3 postcards showing various depictions of F Zones, all printed here in the US. The one in the middle was urging people to buy savings bonds to help fund the war effort. And the one on the right is from one of the Greek parades. There's no date on it, but if you look at the street sign, it's 72nd Street. So it was the F Zones marching during one of the parades, probably during the 40s, I would guess. So during World War II, they formed something called the Greek War Relief Association. And this is a matchbook cover that was used to advertise this Greek war effort. And it was a huge thing, apparently, because they also did labels like this one, showing, the plight of the Greek people. Help Greece now. Here's another one, the Greek War Relief Association. They were located here on Fifth Avenue. And this very Art Deco looking poster, Greek war relief again. And my mother tells me she and all her friends from the cathedral, they all work downtown in the Wall Street area. And at lunchtime, they'd go out on the corners and they'd collect money for Greek war relief, and you got a button if you gave money. And these are some of the buttons. There's a whole bunch of others, but these are just a couple of them. Greek war relief in the Ev zones and so forth. Now, this is just moving a little bit to something different, but related. This is the Apollo Jewelry Company located on Fulton Street, and it shows you some jewelry items that they had available for sale, including the Ev zone on the right, and this bracelet that had all these flags, including the Greek flag next to the British flag. This was probably World War II. And so the Ev zone, talking about the Ev zone was used for advertising in many different ways. Probably one of the most famous was this cover for Life magazine in 1940. This was a picture taken by a woman named Nellies. I don't know if any of you are familiar, but she was a Greek photographer, had already made her name in Greece during the 20s and 30s by photographing a lot of the old villages and people in costumes that was fast disappearing. And the government had her go out all over the country and take photographs. The only place she couldn't go to was Mount Athos because she was a woman. So she sent her husband. And there was an exhibit of her photography at the Benakia 2 years ago, which I went to see. And in a taped interview, she says, so she had to send her husband to Mount Athos to cover Mount Athos. And she says, he did a pretty good job. He almost did as good a job as I would have. So, and she was trained in Germany, and she got stuck here in New York during World War II, and she had a studio on 57th Street. And she used to take photographs for fashion shoots for Vogue and other magazines, and did society weddings, as they say, at the cathedral, from the cathedral. And maybe even this church, for all we know. I don't know. Anyway, so this was her most famous, one of her most famous things that she did for the American press. Now, this is a hanky, silk hanky, showing, again, the relationship between Greece and the U.S. Statue of Liberty with an Ev zone and a Navy bugler. This is the Ev zone importing. It's a Paris import-export company from Baltimore, and they were extolling the virtues of the Ev zone. This is a matchbook cover. And when you open the matchbook, each of the matches is in the shape of a bottle. And they have Retsina, Rizo, Metaxa, and they tell you what an Ev zone is. This is probably 40s, and I just find it interesting that, you know, the matchbooks are like bottles, matchsticks. This was an advertising piece, it's about 2 feet tall, from Canadian Club, and they depicted various types of soldiers from different countries. And one of them, of course, was the Greek Ev zone. And it was like on an easel, and could stand up on the counter, probably in a liquor store to sell Canadian Club. But they were using the Ev zone to do it. No, this is American, yeah. The Canadian Club is a Canadian company. I mean, they sell a lot here. And, you know, they had also like a beefeater from Great Britain, and, you know, other countries had different soldiers with their costumes and stuff. It was just a way of spicing up their advertising, I guess. So after World War II, there was the Marshall Plan to help Greece get back on its feet. And these are a couple of postcards depicting, you know, the Marshall Plan, which was for many different countries, but you see the Greek flag there on the guy's leg, and there's Greek writing at the bottom. And here's another one, building up Greece. There were 18 countries that were involved in this. The European Union. Again, see the Greek flag on the pail. So, after the war, I don't remember after the war, but when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, I remember us getting cards from the relatives in Greece, like this one. And what fascinated me about this is when you opened it up, it was like a 3D. And this shows the people dancing. I don't know if you guys remember this. I remember this quite vividly. So I've started collecting these, finding them, and this was one of the nicest examples I have, which shows the F zones and stuff, and when you open it up, and the Amalia, and then they're dancing in front of the Acropolis. And this is thanks to Tony. This is something from Tony. This is a trio, Bel Canto and Nico Agunadis. This is sort of a bridge between the older generation, like my parents' generation, that listened to Nico Agunadis. That was the big name back in the 30s and 40s. Trio Bel Canto was big in the 60s. So this is interesting that they both came together at the Monte Carlo. Is that one of the Greek hotels, the Monte Carlo? Yeah. Yeah, you see, I'm glad I got you guys that you tell me this. Anyway, but I think this is fascinating because it sort of connects the two generations.
Can I do an aside a second?
Who's that?
I want to do just an aside about the bel canto. My mother's brother was a physics high school teacher and had a few of them as students. And when he moved, they all came to help him move with a
Really?
truck to move him to his new apartment.
Great. And I don't know if you remember that after Trio Bel Canto, it was the Spartans. I don't know if any of you remember the Spartans. But some of them were related to these guys. So it was the younger generation. So, yeah, their group was called the Spartans. And I remember we used them a lot for our dances at St. Paul's, where I grew up. Broadway. These are some playbills from some Greek and Greek-related shows. Katina Paxinou in the National Theatre of Greece, that's from the 40s, maybe early 50s.
The best actress.
Melina Mercouri in Ilia Darling, which is a version of Never on Sunday. I don't know why they changed the name, but anyway. Zorba the Greek with Anthony Quinn, and a play named Rose with Olympia Dukakis. And by the way, I don't know if you read, but Betty White, who had a Greek mother, is going to be honored with a stamp. The U.S. stamp is going to come out shortly, I believe. So as the community became a little more affluent, they used to travel back to Greece. And one of the ways was the Queen Frederica. And here's a brochure showing the ship. And this is one of the menus from, I believe, first class. And if you notice in the break front behind Father, a lot of those pictures are from the same series. This was a series of paintings done by a British artist. The originals are in the Benaki Museum, and you see in the lower left-hand corner, that's the Benaki symbol. And they reproduced costumes from all over Greece. This British guy went all over Greece in the 30s, I believe, and he painted these people in costumes from all over. And it was released in a very limited edition by the Benaki. But the shipping company and Queen Frederica used them as covers for their menus. So I'll have to send, I have it at home. Let me see. No, I don't see it here. But he was a British guy. I forget the name. You could also go on the Olympia, which was part of the Greek line. And what's interesting here is they're using the statue of Athena Nike, which is in the Louvre. So someone thinking they're going to go to Greece and see that statue, no, you're not going to go to Greece and see that statue. You got to go to Paris to the Louvre, because they stole it, as everyone used to say. Anyway, but this is another shipping. So eventually we got to travel by air. And this is a group from the church in Stamford going on a pilgrimage to Greece. And they were going to go on Pan Am.
Did you say Stanford?
And Stamford.
Yeah, that's, what's the Father's church?
Church of the Archangels, that's from Stamford, I believe. So you also see how dressed up everyone used to be when they traveled. So TWA was one of the major carriers, and these are 2 postcards that they issued to advertise their service to Greece. Of course, depicting the Acropolis and the Parthenon. Sabina issued this postcard, and it shows the Tsarouchi, the shoe of the Evzone, with the Acropolis, Parthenon in the background. And apparently they were big also because you'd fly to Brussels and then change planes there. That was before they could go all the way. So in 1968, I think, the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of North and South America at the time had their convention in Athens. I think it's the first time and only time they had their convention abroad. Clergy lady, yeah. And the Greek government issued this stamp, which shows at that time the symbol of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of North and South America. And this is what is called a first day cover. It's the first day that the stamp was issued. This is a fan, and it shows a picture of Christ on the front. But what was interesting to me was what was on the back. This was from the Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church in Kansas City. And it was from a funeral parlor. So things got a little hot and heavy. You had a fan you could use to fan yourself. Now, these are some... What?
No AC.
No, of course no AC. So these are some buttons for your lapel, for your whatever, from various churches. The one in the middle is from the Boston Church. On the left is from a St. Demetrius. Again, they don't tell you where, but I think it's Astoria. It just looks like the building in Astoria. And on the right is the cornerstone laying for St. Barbara's in New Haven. But what's interesting about this is, look at the date. The date was December 7th, 1941. Something else happened on December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor. So I'm sure it was eclipsed. It eclipsed their cornerstone laying. But again, this is something else, some other indications of communities. So originally I was going to do a presentation following Tony's Greek churches in the U.S. This is not quite in the U.S., but this is Ionian Village. So this was the camp that was set up by the Archdiocese in 1970. The opening was in 1970. And this is the chapel. This is a nighttime scene. This is a postcard. So I'm going to show you a bunch of Greek churches in the U.S. now. So this is an old postcard. I think it's St. George's in Manchester, New Hampshire. And what I like is the inscription on the top. I'll bet I could smell garlic if I went to church here.
They cook with a lot of
So, yeah, a little on the, you know,
That's certainly a compliment.
very racist, let's call it. Anyway, but this is an old church. It's no longer in existence because what they've done, a lot of these smaller towns in New England had 2 or 3 churches, and eventually they all formed one joint community. So there's only one church there now. Does anyone know what this is? This is an artist's depiction of the St. Catherine's Church in Astoria. It's a little fanciful. Some of the elements are still there. There's the ramp, the circular dome, and of course there are buildings all around. Here it's showing grass. But this is an architect's depiction of what they envisioned the church to be. So.
This was actually built in.
Yeah, it's,
What happened? And what year was it?
it was in the 60s or 70s, I think. So this is we have a picture of it outside. This was the prior home of Annunciation on, was it West 54th?
That's a postcard?
Yes. And I think it was a Baptist church before us when we bought it. I'm not sure. But it had a dome, and as you see, they did a lot of very fancy decoration. So it really, really looked like a Greek church. And the back of it gives the priest's name and Evangelismos, pastor of the Greek Orthodox community, a phone number. And the artist who apparently did the artwork in the church.
Is this the postcard that's?
Yes, this is,
Vestibule?
exactly. Okay.
Does that building still exist there, or does it?
No, they tore it down because they needed the land. It was eminent domain. They needed the land for a police station, I think.
Oh, that's
So, right? Is that what?
A New Deal project in the 1930s, and it's the precinct right across from St. George
Right.
Church,
right.
right across the street from it, yeah.
Anyway, a historic piece of ephemera from our church. Here is a brochure from 1923, from St. Connie and Helen in Brooklyn. And when you open it up, it's their budget for the year. And if you look very closely, there's right about in the middle, $36.50 for eggs for Pascha, Avra Pascha. And so their budget for the year was $26,000. 1922. This was the mother church of all the Brooklyn churches. It's now a cathedral. So there was a man named Jason Malbus, who was a very religious man from Greece, and he came to this country around the turn of the century, 1900, and he had this vision. He wanted to buy property and farm it. So he eventually was able to buy some property with some friends, and they worked the land, and it became like a plantation. He died around 1950, and in his honor, they built a church, and you see the church in the right-hand corner, right middle, and the church was eventually consecrated. The Archdiocese was a little hesitant to give them credit as a community, but eventually they did get approval from the Archdiocese, and it's now included in the yearbook. But this man was running, it was like a kibbutz almost, because friends of his would help the land. Yes, Vicky?
I wanted to mention, Eli, it might be interesting for everybody, that it was run on a communistic principle. They had a communal dining.
Well, that's why I said it was run like a kibbutz. Yeah, like communal, exactly,
Yeah,
communal
and
dining.
That's why the Archdiocese.
Exactly. Oh, that, well, okay.
Very politically
Yeah.
controversial, that was. And it doesn't exist anymore. My parents
Oh, really?
And my brother, yeah, just to see what it was like.
Now, there's a postcard, which I didn't include, but there's a postcard of the church. Tony has it and I have it as well, but I didn't include it. So, yeah, they're now included as part of the archdiocese, but back then it took them a long time. That was probably why. So one of the most famous churches in the U.S. is Tarpon Springs, St. Nicholas. And this shows you a drawing of the original church. On the top. In the middle was their original building. And on the bottom was their current building, which was built, I think, in the 40s. And it's now a cathedral. And of course, Tarpon Springs is where the Epiphany is held every year. And this is an old postcard showing Athenagoras blessing the young man who caught the cross. And this is like a type of card at that time that were called linens, but this one is not the best example. I have another one which you'll see in a minute. But there's a lot of postcards from Tarpon Springs depicting the Greek life there and the church in various different ways. So these are a couple of postcards from Tarpon Springs showing the boats. Aspasia, I think the one on the bottom is St. Nicholas, and they would run various tours out into the bay, Tampa Bay, and very, very Greek. So I had to include this because this is my home parish. It began in the small building that you see on top, St. Paul's Church in Hempstead. The Archbishop Athenagoras at the time sent my uncle out, who's a priest, to form that community. The community was literally growing by leaps and bounds every single week because it was right in the center of Nassau County. They were building homes everywhere. After World War II, everyone was moving out of the city into the suburbs. This community was growing by leaps and bounds. So there was a faction that did not want to move from this tiny building you see on the top, which was packed every Sunday. My uncle said, enough of this. He got a bunch of like-minded people. He got money from them, and he bought the land without board approval. And he said, we're building a new church. Case closed. Some people left. Many people stayed. Anyway, they finally built this beautiful church on the bottom.
Is it still there?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. At its height, when I was going there in the early 60s, we had 2 packed liturgies every Sunday, sometimes 3 liturgies. They had a liturgy in English, which was held in one of the halls. At the same time, the second liturgy was being held. When we used to do palms, the Goya used to make palms. We used to make 6,000 or 7,000 palms. Wow. It was a huge, huge community. Now, a lot of other churches have opened up within 15, 20 minutes of this one, and they've lost some of their parishioners, but they're still an important church, and it's now the Cathedral of Long Island. So another very famous church is this one. Does anyone know what this one is? Yeah, this is St. Sophia in LA, Los Angeles. To me, very gaudy, over the top. The Scores brothers from 20th Century Fox gave money to build the church. And they got a lot of their scene designers to paint some of the interiors. And there are rumors that they used, I think, Lana Turner as a model for the Panagia. Loretta Young. Yeah, Loretta Young.
For St. Sophia?
No, for the Panagia. Anyway. Yeah, Piscoris, they put up all the money, right. This is another church in California. This is the cathedral in Oakland, California, across the bay from San Francisco. They have a beautiful copper dome on the inside, which you see here. It's a large community, and they have a beautiful setting. They overlook the harbor, and they have a view of the San Francisco skyline. And when I visited them some time ago, they're right next to a Mormon temple. And there are 2 signs. One says Greek parking, the other one says Mormon parking. So I have a picture of that someplace. But this is the interior of their church. It's a beautiful church. So this is what's called a linen. It's a type of postcard popular during the 40s. And even though this is not depicting a church, it is in a way because the church is in the background. It's really for the Greyhound bus terminal in Newport News, Virginia, and the Greek church is in the background. It's like an afterthought. And this is also another, this is a depiction of the Manhattan Bridge as you're entering New York. And you say, okay, why are you showing us this? Well, that 4 buildings in from the left there, you see a building with a dome? That used to be a synagogue. It is now St. Barbara's. That's St. Barbara's. And it's been there for many, many years. I don't know exactly when, but they bought the synagogue and they converted it into a church. But when this depiction, it was a synagogue. And finally, I want to show you another famous church. This is the Annunciation in Milwaukee. It was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. Milwaukee. So a lot of these Greek churches were running festivals to raise funds for their community. And this is a poster from the Houston church, which is another huge community. It's from the 1980s, and it depicts the Evzones dancing. These are actually Cretans with their white boots and their vrakis. But some of these festivals are so huge, they actually put up billboards around the city, before the festival. They're huge. And my parents used to go to this church when they moved down there, and they used to start preparing months in advance. They had pasticcio Sunday, where everyone would come and make pasticcio, and they would freeze them. They would have other Sundays where they'd make something else and freeze it. And this went on for most of the year because they had to prepare for the thousands of people that would show up. This is courtesy of Tony. And this shows a diner in Connecticut called the Olympia Diner. As we know, many diners and coffee shops were Greek. This one was run by as I said, in Newington, Connecticut. This is from 1960. Just like their menus are like a huge volume. Look at all the stuff that they do for you, Anyway. So restaurants in New York. This is a depiction of what people say is the first Greek restaurant in New York. It was called the Constantinople Restaurant. It's on 12 East 30th Street. This is a famous photograph by a photographer, Andreas Feiniger, showing a caffeinion in downtown New York. They don't give you the exact address. But it could have been Madison Street for all we know. But, it shows the Greek lettering on this shop here in New York. So this is a postcard from Pappas Restaurant in Sheepshead Bay. My mother tells me when she was young, Sheepshead Bay was practically completely owned by Greeks. And this was one of the restaurants. I'm not sure if this is any relation to Father Pappas's family. It might be. I don't know, because he lives there. So one of the most famous restaurants in New York City was Seafair the Aegean. So they apparently began in the Greenwich Village. So the top postcard shows you an image of their store on, I think, 8th Street in Greenwich Village. The middle one is another view of that same location in color, and it might even be a later time. It looks a little more modern. Eventually he moved to 56th Street, I think, And him being Christos Bastis, he's a very famous restaurateur here in New York. He was also a great collector of ancient Greek art and Minoan art from the island of Crete. And he used to display it in his restaurant, the one on the bottom. After the restaurant closed and he passed away, much of his collection went to the Brooklyn Museum and to the Metropolitan. And there was also an auction of other stuff at Christie's or Sotheby's. But it was one of the more well-known Greek restaurants. And here's their menu. And this shows you some Minoan art. Again, going with the theme. So it was on 56th Street. And artwork was, in addition to the ancient Greek and Minoan artifacts, he also commissioned art to hang in the restaurant. These are 3 different postcards depicting artwork from his restaurants. The one on the bottom is from the Greenwich Village restaurant, and it doesn't depict anything Greek, just shows fishermen. And the one on the right is also a contemporary painting of what some of the ancient Minoan art looked like. And finally on the top, it's some modern Greek artist. It's a Greek fishing village. So one of the most famous restaurants I remember going to when I was young was the Pantheon restaurant on 8th Avenue.
Every Sunday.
We used to meet there, right, every Sunday. And
Fathers go to.
it always, when I got older, when I realized what the Pantheon was, it's a monument, it's a building in Rome. Why? It had a Greek, it was used as a Greek restaurant, but it's a Greek word anyway. And it actually shows the Pantheon, it's upside down, you can. But the top part is the actual Pantheon in Rome. Finally, I want to give credit to a local restaurant. I don't know if any of you remember this restaurant, Metsova, here on the Upper West Side. And this is a box of matches, and it was cuisine from the Ipidos Mountains, 65 West 70th Street. So there were other Greek towns. We didn't call it Greek town here in New York, but other places did. Detroit was a very famous one, and it's still in existence. And just like our Little Italy, they've preserved it as a tourist thing in Detroit. Boston always had a lot of Greeks. This is a menu from the 1940s, but again, it depicts the Evzone and the Acropolis.
What is that I wasn't sure of?
What noble and immortal nation? Greece. So this is probably World War II. I wouldn't be surprised if it's World War II. So the 1939 World's Fair, there was a Greek pavilion, and the postcard on the bottom is a linen, as I mentioned to you. It's a type of printing process, and it shows the pavilion. And the top shows some of the, I guess, the women who manned who were guides at the pavilion. So now I'm going to show you a couple of photographs that I've come across, which again are not identified, but we know that this is a Greek band and they've got the Greek flag and the American flag. But this is probably 20s or 30s.
What year was that?
I don't know. My guess is 20s or 30s. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Now, this is, again, an unidentified photograph, but a bunch of people in Greek costumes. The women's shoes and hairstyles are definitely 30s. But it must have been some ethnic night at some organization, because on the left, you see you can make out France, NCE, and on the right it says Italy. And in the center, we're right in between France and Italy, we're Greece. So, it's like probably a ethnic celebration, and they're wearing the costume of the country. This is from an AHEPA chapter in New Britain, Connecticut. It looks like it's a cast of a some play they put on from 1938, I think. Again, the Greek costumes in this country. So, I don't know, does anyone know what these are?
From cigar box.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So, cigar boxes. So these are samples from, a salesman's sample book. And, you could probably buy them and stick it on a box of, a shop owner could stick it on a box of cigars and call it the John Nicotsas cigar for the ethnic crowd. The bottom one is the Acropolis, of course, and tons and tons of other ethnic groups are represented, so it wasn't just Greeks, but these are the two that are Greek related. So far I've shown you all the good about our community. Well, we had some bad players as well. 1903, think about that, that's a long time ago. In Lynn, Massachusetts, the police department was looking for Peter Treboskilis, a Greek. And he's a fruit peddler. If found, arrest and notify me, and I will send an officer for him. Chief of Police in Lynn, Massachusetts. Lynn and a lot of cities in New England had a lot of Greeks. But in 1903, we already had criminals in our community. By the way, I also have another postcard similar to this from Utah. And it shows a wanted poster, a guy in profile and the full face, Greek, wanted for something, murder, I don't know exactly what, I can't find it, but I wanted to include it, but I just couldn't find it. But, these things happened in our community as well. Political buttons. So I don't know how many of you remember the political thing that you said, I like Ike. I like Ike was like one of the ways they were trying to get Eisenhower elected. So in the upper left-hand